A lot of the times we see that our clients' problems are very similar across different environments. So yeah, your question might be relevant for more than just you, right? Quick introduction, Craig's a Microsoft Solutions Architect. Elian is a licensing specialist. They both going to be presenting off Ingram Micro today, who is our commercial partner for Microsoft. This event is tailored to basically give a little bit of insights to what benefits we offer as part of being a Microsoft licensing provider. So if you guys are watching this and you like the content and you like the people that are presenting and you think you can benefit for further conversations, that's the people that we're going to be bringing to talk to you guys, right? All you need to do is buy your licenses from us. So hopefully you get it. I look after the specialist division at PB Tech, so we oversee cloud, cybersecurity, MSP and services now, and end user devices. So I have a team under me, but as you know, I work with clients as well, so I'm part of that team. And the whole idea is that we are transitioning from being just a hardware shop at PB Tech to have a whole lot of IP in-house, help our customers in other areas, and really expand and reach the end-to-end technology provider, which is the obvious path for us, right? Greg, who is here as well, heads our managed services and services team. So he's going to be doing a little bit of a presentation in the end of the session, particularly around where we are seeing that PB Tech is sitting to help the clients on the services space. And again, it's although it's a new area for PB Tech, the people that are involved on the team are very experienced. So don't feel like our services department is an experienced department, because it is not. The people that are part of that department now has all combined hundreds of years of experience amongst all of them, and they're going to be very valuable to you guys. So I'll hand it over to Craig, who's going to cover the Entra and identity pieces, some demonstration and bits and pieces about the technology. And like I said, raise your hand, ask questions, participate, because that's the whole idea of doing a smaller event.
Cool. Thanks very much, Victor. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see you all. And thank you for taking the time out to come and listen to old me. I hope the session is valuable to all of you. And as Victor mentioned, we're really trying to get this really engaging, so please feel free to stop me wherever you want to. The idea is that I'm going to not just deliver it all via PowerPoint. I'm really going to dive into the demos and just have a look exactly how these things are working. And we're basically going to take the view of moving through the various SKUs, moving through the various features of Entra IDs, basic, freeze, plan 1, plan 2, etc., into Entra Suite, and then just try and show you, perhaps give you some food for thought around what you can implement within your organization. Maybe that'll be a good fit, maybe that won't, but really just covering some of the aspects of the features of all of those different plans. So if we have a look at today's digital landscape, we basically have identities. We either have human identities or we have identities that are attached to our workloads. So different, generally called service principals or service identities. And we basically have all of these identities that are either authenticating against our own internal applications or to external applications. And what we're seeing is that there is a large amount of these identities that get pushed through, and over time they become unmanaged. So we might put something in place today for a certain application to authenticate against another one. That changes over a couple of years, that gets decommissioned, and then suddenly we don't manage that identity anymore, but that identity belongs and still stays within the organization. So we really want to look at something as to how do we automate the management, how do we automate the curation of these identities, and how do we manage that life cycle around these identities. So with Microsoft Entra, we've basically got a couple of options around us. So the first one is what everyone will be aware of. Entra ID used to be called Azure Active Directory. It is our main Microsoft directory service within the cloud. So anything modern work, anything Azure, we basically by default authenticate against Entra ID. Now Entra ID has various flavors. So we have flavors such as free, We have basic, so if you are using business basic or business standard, you will get the basic version of Entra ID. And then business premium and above, we start moving into the premium features around Entra ID Plan 1, Plan 2, and what those look like. We also then have Entra Suites, which is an add-on to that, and I'll take you guys through that. And very closely with Entra ID, we have Microsoft Entra Identity Governance. So they work very closely together. And to start off with, I'm going to cover both of these tool sets within the conversation. So if we have a look at a basic start, so this is, if we cast our minds back, we've got Greenfields deployment. What we look at from an identity perspective, Microsoft has taken the approach around security by default. So they have security default enabled by default. And with that, we get a level of security. So we're going to get the multi-factor authentication piece put down. But with that, it is not enough for us to secure identity just with multi-factor authentication. And I'll give you an example of this. So last week, there was a company, quite a large company in Australia, that the user accounts were phished, or the one user account was phished, it was compromised, even though there was multi-factor authentication against it. And what happened was they phished the account, they tried to put ransomware down into the environment, and when they tried to do that, it was blocked by a conditional access policy. And the reason it was blocked was because it wasn't compliant. It didn't have a device compliant tag against it. So they were able to phish the account, but they weren't able to deploy the ransomware because of that conditional access policy applying on a in-tune compliance level. So it's really important that we do that security by layers. So the identity piece is not the only piece that we focus on. We can have phishing resistant methods such as MFA, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we are going to be secure because we need to do it in layers. So with Entra ID, we obviously have the capability to do conditional access policies if we use Entra ID Plan 1. I wish Microsoft would make conditional access policies available for all of them. I think it is such a good tool to secure your environment, but as it stands today, we can only do that within Entra ID Plan 1. So if we have a look at, and you guys have probably seen this slide many, many times, it's really around basically utilizing as the least passwords as possible. So using the Authenticator app, even better using Windows Hello because that attaches it to the hardware itself. So if we can remove the user, a attacker would have to basically get access to the device itself as well as to the credentials. So we're basically removing that middleman that can attack. We can also look at security keys, so FIDO2 keys, and biometrics itself. These are some of the password protection or the passwordless protection that is available within Entra ID. Conditional access, again, is one of the biggest things I believe should be a standard across all organizations. What it does is it takes a large amount of signals, so we can do things like risky users, risky sign-ins, like I said, device compliance, and we can put all this together and make a decision if we're going to allow that user or that managed identity to access the resource. This is going to become, in my opinion, this is the main tool that we should be utilizing for all identities. And I'll show you how we're actually integrating conditional access within identities now. So if we have a look at, this is going to be the demo that I'm going to take us through. I'm going to take us through what a basic PIM deployment looks like. Then I'm going to do basic PIM with approvals. Then I'll move into PIM with conditional access. So this is done through what is known as authentication contexts. And it is basically tagging a little signal, and we're applying that to the privileged identity. So what we can do is we can actually say that if you want to elevate your privilege, you have to come from a device that has got a compliance policy against it. So if we cast our minds back to that example I gave you, even if I got access to someone's credentials, I could log in, elevate myself, but I wouldn't be able to do it unless I elevate myself from a device that is enrolled into Intune. And that's how we integrate a identity together with a conditional access policy. And then I'll take us through the approval conditions, conditional access, lifecycle workflows, and access packages. So this is basically throughout the entire lifecycle management capability. So let's just jump.
Why do you load this?
Sure.
All of us here are using conditional access already. Raise your hand. Partially. Okay.
Cool. It's a great question. So if we have a look at entraid.microsoft.com, oh, sorry, my apologies, you guys can't see this. Give me a sec. So if we have a look at entra.microsoft.com, this is really the single pane of glass of where we're managing all of our identities. So all of the products that I'm going to demo today are all through, and we can manage it through this admin center. So as I said, I'm going to start with privileged identity management. So basically, pretty sure we're all familiar with it, but if we're not, what it is we are allowing a normal user to elevate their privilege when they require that privilege. So there's a bad habit within IT that we carry that privilege throughout our day. What I mean by that is there's a lot of accounts that are carrying a global admin resource or global admin role on their day-to-day emails, Teams, user accounts. That is the biggest no-no from a security perspective. And I think that this is why we should look at things like PIM, because we should not be carrying that active privilege every day of our normal accounts, because those normal accounts are logging into devices, they're logging into different Wi-Fi, so it's just increasing that risk of you being phished. And when we're phished with our elevated account, we run into problems where we're locked out of our entire tenancy. So to counter that, we basically want to enable a user, when they require it, to elevate their privilege. And to do that, we use what is known as privileged identity management. It is part of Microsoft Entra Plan 2. So you would have to, if you're using Business Premium, for example, you would have to add the P2 capability to it. But we basically can enable PIM within 3 ways. So we can do it within Microsoft Entra roles, which is basically the directory that we have. Or we can do it within groups, so we can actually add ourselves as a member or owner to a group, or we can do it on the Azure resources itself. So we can say, I want to become the owner of an Azure subscription for the next 30 minutes or whatever it may be. So within the demo, I'm just going to do Microsoft Entra roles. So if I go to roles over here and I type in global admin, so say, for example, I want to make global administrator eligible for a specific user. I can click on add assignment. And in here, I am able to set who I want that user, or which user I want to be able to elevate themselves. So I'll basically select that one. That one's already selected for me. I select the user, and then that user will then get access. So for example, over here, the user is called the general, and they have the eligible assignment to become a global administrator. Now, there's a couple of settings that we can set for this as well, which is highly important. So by default, Microsoft allows us to activate or elevate ourselves for 8 hours. So in my opinion, that is far too long. We shouldn't be able to do that. So we can actually set what the maximum amount is. Now, if we think about a daily task, I don't think we're going to need to be a global admin for 8 hours of the day. Unless we really are busy with a project and we're in and out and we're busy making changes, generally we can make the change within 30 minutes to an hour. So you can set the maximum duration over here. Highly recommend that you do so and have a least amount of hours or minutes as possible. We can also set justifications. So do you want to know why this person wants to do it? And then we can also do what is known as ticket information. So if your policy says that you have to log a ticket with our help desk first, reference that ticket number for this approval to happen. You can put that in. And then we can also put an approval. So what this is going to do is it's going to send an email to that group or to that user for that person to actually approve the person's elevation. So if we click update there, I'll basically show you how it's going to work. So I've basically now just given the user called the general the ability to scale up or increase their privilege should they require it. So if I go now to portal.azure.com, and I log in as the general, I can then go to PIM and I can actually look at what I have available to me. So there you can see I have the global administrator. I have a job that I need to do now, so I'm going to click on activate. It's going to do a validating request there on the top. What it's actually doing when it's doing that is checking these settings that we have set over here. So when it's doing a validation, it's going to see, okay, what has the administrator enabled from a settings perspective, and what do I have to present to the user? So you can see there's the ticket system. Here's the ticket number that we have to put in. Here's the reasoning. And you can see I can't change the duration of hours because we have actually set that maximum duration over there. I can then click activate, and it'll then go and activate the global administrator role for me once I approve it from an admin perspective.
Great.
So,
just a question.
sure.
Of course, global admin rights, it's the extreme, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about people that probably will be involved in IT and needs to do something on their level. How about lesser roles, like a user just requests to download an application, for example, temporarily because they need to do something and is an accountant person, or somebody's requesting temporary access to a particular SharePoint site. I don't know if you go as far as that.
Mm-hmm.
How do they manage this? Because I think that's going to be most of the...
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it comes later where we actually automate the access for that through what's known as access packages. So I'll take you through that. But the other way that we can, I'm not going to touch on it too much today, but local admin, we can use what is known as LAPS, and LAPS has been moved into Entra ID as well. We can manage those local passwords and the rotation of those local passwords, which is really important because historically we set local admin passwords and they don't change for 20 years. So everyone actually becomes to know what the local admin password is. So everyone can log in and do their own thing. So LAPS is a way that we utilize that to manage all of those local admin passwords. But I'll get to when I show you the access packages. So you can see over here, as the approver, have seen that the general would like to update. This is the reasoning, this is the ticket number, and then I can approve that. And once that's been approved, then that person will have the global admins for that 30-minute period that's done. So very nice way for us, again, to not carry that privilege all the time with us. We really want to try and steer away from that as much as possible. So if we quickly jump back to this slide over here. So basically what I've shown you now is basic PIM and then basic PIM with approval. That is the email flow that went through. Now I want to touch on PIM with conditional access. So what this does is, and it's very, very cool. So what it does is we are able to create what is known as authentication context. All it really is a tag, all right? We basically, the only thing that we configure is a name and a description. That's all we do. So it's basically a text tag that we apply. In the background, it's giving it an ID. So anything from C1 all the way to C99. So we can create 99 of these authentication contexts. I mean, 6 months ago it was only 25, so they really are increasing these because I think we're seeing quite a lot of people starting to adopt authentication contexts. And what we're doing is so I've created one here called Strong Authentication. All it is Strong Authentication, and the description I said this label is used with PIM. Now what we're doing is we're bringing this into a conditional access policy, and this is how we're linking an identity, a privileged escalation or activation, and putting it into a conditional access policy. So if we think about, I've got the eligibility to upgrade myself to global admin, and that's all good, and I can do that, and we've got approval, but my manager, I do it often, so he just clicks on approve. How do we secure that habit or just that memory of, okay, now it's Craig, he's doing it again, we'll just approve it. We want to put something in place that protects and makes sure that the device or the person that is elevating, we are sure that it is that person. And we do that through a conditional access policy with authentication context. So what we do is we look at, if we scroll down here, so auth with context. So I've created a conditional access policy over here. I've set it up just for the one person. And you can see over here the target resources. We're setting authentication context and we're selecting the one we have created, okay? Under the grant, I'm saying that if you want to elevate yourself to a global admin, you have to come from a device that is marked as compliant. Therefore, I am ensuring that this device that this person is elevating themselves on is a device that's enrolled in my Intune and is a device that is compliant with my compliance policies that I've set in Intune. That's only one example. We can set this to risky users. So if you have risky sign-ins attached to your account, or you have a medium or high score from a risky user perspective. So say, for example, your password's been seen on the web. That's going to elevate your status to risky users, medium or high. If you have that, sorry, you're not allowed to elevate yourself to a global admin anymore because your account is risky. And this is how we're going to basically automate the security of that. And we're just adding that another layer, like I explained in the beginning with that example. We want to do the security in depth and have those different layers that we put down. So for this example, I'm going to be just using a required device to be marked as compliant. Reason being is this is my tenant called Azure in the cloud. This one is on the Ingram Micro domain. So this one certainly, this laptop won't be compliant in my Intune because it's not enrolled in my Intune. So by default, it's getting a non-compliant status. So let's test this. So basically, if we go back to the global admin one we have over here, and we go to settings, right on the top, we are able to set an additional, just give me a sec, roles, open. Right on the top, we are able to set an additional challenge. All right, so highly recommend that if we are dealing with highly privileged escalations or highly privileged eligibilities and activations, that we want to, on activation, require a specific here. So we can re-challenge the MFA if we wanted to. But like I've mentioned, even though they are phishing resistant, there has been cases and are cases still, even though we have MFA enabled, that they do get access to it. Whereas if we move it to a conditional access authentication context, we are then kicking that authentication of that conditional access policy through. Whereas we're going to need to not be a risky user. So when we talk about risky users, we're going to start picking up things like impossible travel. So I generally log on from New Zealand, Auckland, New Zealand to be specific, and then suddenly someone tries to elevate my account to a global admin from Spain. That's impossible travel because I've logged in 5 minutes ago here in Auckland. How did I get to Spain in 5 minutes? Risky users will be marked as high and block it there. So we're automating all of those different signals and putting that into a conditional access policy. So I'm just going to take the justifications off here just so we can do it quickly. But basically what I've done is I've said, cool, I want to integrate the elevation of a global admin into a conditional access policy. Here's the context that I have created, that simple text that we created. Click on update. And basically what's going to happen now is, let me just see if I can quickly just kill this role. I hope it's been 5 minutes. Deactivate. This sometimes doesn't allow me to do it so quickly, but let me just quickly deactivate it, just so I can show you the difference of what it actually does. Deactivate. Okay, cool. So this should refresh the portal now. Cool. So now I don't have the global admin role anymore. Now we have added I've still got the role, but we've added that setting that it requires to go through that conditional access policy, and it has to come from a device that is marked as compliant. When I click activate, it's going to do that validation of the request again. It's going to have a look and see what are those settings that we have set down, and there we go. It's going to say a conditional access policy is enabled and may require additional verification. So if I click that, it's going to try and do that verification, but what it's doing now is it's looking at Intune and saying, okay, Craig wants to elevate. He does have eligibility to elevate, but also there's a conditional access policy that says it has to come from a compliant device. It does that check now. It knows that this is an Ingram microdomain device, doesn't know anything about this device, and there you can see it's blocked it. So even though I authenticated myself perfectly fine, I have all the right usernames, passwords, MFA challenges, I'm still going to get blocked because I'm coming from a device that it does not trust. And this is how we build on that zero trust piece. Any questions on that? Cool. So that's really how we secure and just increase, like I said, that the defense in different layers. Identities just with MFA aren't enough anymore. We really want to try and think about how we're going to push these through conditional access policies. Now, the next thing is, how do we standardize the way that we assign an identity to someone? So we have people joining, we have people moving within our organization, we have people leaving our organization. And what Microsoft has created is called lifecycle workflows. And they very simply called it joiner, mover, and leaver. So these are all templates that we can utilize to create a process for every employee that joins us, every employee that moves within our business units, and every employee that leaves our organization. And we're automating that to be able to be repeatable within our organization when these users move around. So basically what it really is if we have a look at this one over here, we are able to set triggers. So a trigger could be a reporting manager. So if your manager changes to another person, then you're going to get the certain tasks that run. And you can basically set what that scope looks like from a task perspective. So I want to bring up one that I've done. So if we have a look at this one over here, workflows. So if we have a look at the one that I've done here, we can see that this is a configure a new hire, and this new hire will get the following task pushed down to it. So it's going to get the user account, enable the user account. It's going to get a welcome email that we can fully customize. So as soon as we create that account, that user is going to get the email, welcome, this is the type of things that you need to know about the business, whatever it may be. We're also going to get added to the specific users. So if I know I'm joining the HR or the finance team needs access to specific groups, then they get access to those groups automatically. And then also we're going to get assigned the right licenses. So we can actually set which 365 licenses we're automatically going to assign to the users. So if we're using Copilot for 365 within one business unit only, then they'll get that Copilot license automatically assigned to them. So a very cool way and clean way of us to assign specific tasks and access to users within from a starting point.
Just a question, Craig. Can the license assigned be linked to the user group that the user is being added to? So for example, in a big organization, sometimes the IT person adding the user into Entra won't know which, from the top of their head, which applications the account departments use. If we assign them to a user group, can it pull licenses directly from everybody that the accounting group needs?
So you would do that with with the access package. So what this is going to do is this is going to automatically assign a standard set of licenses to all the users. Whereas if they needed access to a specific SharePoint or something like that, then you're going to do the access packages. Hold the question. Let me just cover that one and see if it answers it or not. Yeah. So basically what this is really around us standardizing the way we get our joins. So we onboard a user, how we standardize the way that the users move to a new division, and how we offboard them automatically. And this ties really nicely with what is known as access packages. All right, so User starts, they get that flow done, they add it to the right group, they get the welcome email, they get the right licenses. Fantastic. Now, there may be times, and I think Victor did allude to it, where yes, you're going to join HR, but you might also work on a project within the finance team or work in a project with another business unit. And we really want to try and steer away from manually adding people to specific groups, etc. We want to try and automate this life cycle all the time. So this is what this is all about, is automation, automation, automation. So what we can do is we can build what is known as catalogs. All right. These catalogs have resources assigned to them. So a resource can be an application. So you can see I've got a custom chat app that I've built. That's an enterprise app sitting in Azure. I've added that. There's a Copilot SharePoint site, and I've added a Teams group that I want this person to be added to. Now, we can add things like a Microsoft Entra role as well. So if you wanted to add a specific role to the group, you can do that. SharePoint sites, applications, and groups and teams. The catalog itself is really just a collection of resources. That's all it is. Where the fun comes is where we actually create the access package itself. So the access package, we would basically select out of the catalog what resources we want to add, and then we would present that access package to the users itself. All right. So what we can do is we can say, all right, there's a different policy, so only this user group can access these access policies, or everyone can access the access policies. Depending on how we want to deliver it, we would basically create a policy for that. And what it does is if we log in to the My Accounts, we can, so if you go to myaccount.microsoft.com, under My Access, you're going to get a browse available access packages. So this is me logged in as the general, not as a global admin or anything like that. It's just me. And you can see I have a package that is available to me. All right. Now, this package, if I click on it, it's going to show me exactly what details it has. So if you enable this, you're going to get part of the Meta Meet, you're going to get the chat app, and you're going to get access to Copilot SharePoint site. So here's the Copilot SharePoint site at the moment. So if I try and access it as it stands now, it's going to tell me that I need permission to it. All right. What would we usually do? Put in there re-permissions. Someone then, as a SharePoint admin, is probably going to go and add me as a member of that SharePoint site, because that's what we generally do. But if we do it with access packages, we can revoke and remove that much easier. Because if there's 10 things to add this user to, we're going to go do manual, add it 10 times. When that user leaves, we have to go manually and remove that permission 10 times. So if we look at the access packages, we can say, cool, this one's available. I'm going to say, I'd like this one. I'm not going to give a reasoning. And then it'll go and process this. So we can also, again, set a workflow. So if we wanted this approval chain to go to email someone for them to approve the access package, we can set that up as well. Basically what happens is this takes about a minute, it'll update itself, and then it'll become active. As soon as it becomes active, you'll see I will be able to I'll be able to see the SharePoint site now. So all I've done now is logged in as a normal user. I've said, cool, give me that access package, and I should be able to access the Copilot site now because I have enabled that access package. Really nice, clean way of us providing resources or active resources to our end users. Again, we can set, do we want to allow the users to ask for specific times? So can a user activate this access package for 6 months? Cool, there might be a reason for that. But we want to try and automate this as much as possible because it's very easy for us to just come in here, remove the access package, and that user has no access to all of those systems anymore. Any questions?
Is access package part of
P2.
P2? Okay. Is that on a tenancy level, or you can specify?
No, you can do it per user.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So every user you're going to allow to access packages that have to be licensed. Okay. All right. I'm going to move on to the next one if there's no questions, but please feel free to let me know if there are. So this next one's quite an interesting one. It's not a Microsoft built product, but actually a bought product. Was called Knox. And it was initially bought because of the multi-cloud dream that Microsoft envisioned, that we'd all be able to afford to have workloads in Amazon, workloads in GCP, workloads in Azure, and we would all be working in harmony. And it was really targeted for that. So basically cloud agnostic and be able to manage all the permissions across those platforms. What I've seen is that this product is really valuable even if you are in a single hyperscaler. So even if we're only sitting in Azure or we're only sitting in AWS or GCP, this is a really great tool to do what you know as permissions creep, and I'll show you exactly what that is. So basically, as I explained, over time we are adding permissions, changing permissions, giving people permissions to certain things, and all we're doing is stacking those permissions on top of each other. Before we know it, we've probably got permissions to things we haven't used in many years. I certainly have. I know I've got permissions to things now that I don't use. Because I need it at a certain time, I got given that permission, and it's really hard for technical or for an administration to keep track of that. And this is why, again, we want to automate this as much as possible. So if we had greenfields and we could all start with access packages and we could all start with workflows, fantastic. But what about current environments? How do we know where we are? How do we know who has access to what permissions have been stacked over time? This is a great tool for that. So this tool will link into your Azure, AWS, GCP environment, and it's going to give you a view of all of the permissions that a specific user has, and how many of those permissions are those users actually using. And it's quite scary, actually, even in my environment. But I mean, I don't really use this environment a lot for production. But basically what's going to happen is we're going to move away from the static approach on the left. We're going to move to the more dynamic approach on the right. But what it really does is it brings all of those identities, all of those permissions into one view and shows you a dashboard for it. So the best way to show you this is to show you the dashboard. And it's called permissions management. So if we open up permissions management, and you'll see here, it is a Cloud Knox portal. All right. So the first page we're going to land on is a dashboard. And it's basically going to say, you're great, you're okay, you're pretty bad. All right. And I'm pretty bad at the moment. I have permission, what is known as permission creep index. I mean, that's a pretty scary term, but anyways. Permission creep index, or PCI, of 84 out of 100. The worst you can do is 100, the best you can do is 1. I'm pretty far from 1. So you can actually have a look and see what is causing it. You can see here we've got 17 inactive users, 9 inactive apps, 2 super users, over-provisioned active apps, inactive groups. So automatically it's going to start bringing in how many registered apps do we have that we registered years ago they're not using anymore. Again, like I said, those apps probably have a service principal attached to them, not using it. So it's a really good way for us to get a quick view. And the way it's designed is we want to do the analysis and the discovery, and then we want to look at the remediation. So if I have a look at the 17 different user accounts, it's going to basically bring it up. So these are the users. Now, the scary part is, for example, this general over here. This person's been granted 18,504 roles within Azure and utilized none of them. So you can see that. And that is the great thing about this tool. So if I enable all of them, you'll see a little bit of a better view from it. So there's one account that I utilize over here. It'll be under super users. So there we go. I've got 18,433 and I've used 3 of them over the last 30 days. So the nice way of, or the nice thing about this tool is that it's going to give you a view of all of your inactive users, inactive service principals, serverless functions, and you're going to be able to start seeing what your environment looks like from a security threat perspective. We can dive deeper into the analytics side of things, so you can actually see which accounts are causing your index to go up, why it is. So you can see I've got access to all of these different roles, not using any of them. Do we need this user account? Why has this user got these permissions? And once we've done our analysis of it, we can look at doing a remediation. Now, a remediation basically works with a few things. So what we can do is we can create custom roles. So we can say activity of a user, we want Superman to only have, let's just do super test. And we want Superman to only have access to, I don't know, 2 things, for example. If I click next and I actually apply this, which I'm not going to do now, what it's going to do is it's going to create a custom CK role called CK role super test. It's going to put that into the Azure subscription and remove all of my other permissions. So we're going to create this custom role. Now we've seen, okay, this guy called Superman has far too many permissions. We know that job function is only A, B, and C. So only give that person access to A, B, and C. And we replace it automatically with this tool, push it out within the tenancy.
That's even for applications outside Microsoft.
That's even for applications outside Microsoft. So we can control all of the permissions from a single pane of glass for this. So I'm just going to cancel that so I don't want to lock myself out. What we can also do is we can also change the permissions. So if we have a look at the various users, again, I'll use the Superman as one. I can come into here and see, okay, this person's the owner, the virtual machine login and user access administrator, and I can actually remove those straight from here as well. You can do that with filters. So in other words, if you wanted to do a clean of all global admins, you could basically filter by who has global admins, tick all the boxes and say remove, and it'll wipe it all out. So a really nice way for us to start cleaning up our environments. We can also, very similarly to the workflow that we saw within PIM, we can create different policies. So we can actually create a virtual machine administrator policy or a policy that allows us to create virtual machines. And instead of giving those users those permissions or using PIM, they can come in here and request those permissions and get them for a certain period of time. Now, the question often is raised, what is the difference of why would I use this over PIM? PIM is fantastic for standard roles that are available within Entra ID and within Azure RBAC roles. PIM does not allow us to assign custom roles. So if we wanted to create a custom package from a role perspective, this is the way to do it, and this is the way for us to request it and receive it from a approval perspective.
Can you create those roles temporarily as well, just like you do it?
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. Greg?
Can it be automated so that I don't know, it schedules on a time-based scenario where it goes, actually these users have just haven't been near anything for 12 months, 6 months, whatever. And so you're not going back and going, I have to do this process manually.
Absolutely. So it's a great question. Right now, there is only one autopilot that's available that does on a scheduled basis. And what it'll do is it'll go through your application and manage identities and look for any permissions, and it will basically remove those permissions for unused 30, 60, or 90 days, and you can set it. Now, the idea around this autopilot function within this tool is that Microsoft is going to add many other autopilot rules, but the only one available right now is to go and check. If you have unused elevated privileges, it'll automatically remove it for you from an autopilot perspective.
Schedules like, let's say, end of financial year on the last month, finance team needs access to this specific tool, you can't schedule
Not
that.
yet, no.
Not as of now.
Not as of now, yeah. And then you get obviously very high level reporting, or not high level, you get very detailed reporting around who used what, etc. So a very cool tool, and like I said, it's often sold as a only utilize it if you've got multi-cloud. I don't believe it. I think I'm only in Azure here. I see great value in this tool, so certainly it's worth having a look and seeing if it is a
Seems like
good
the
fit for you.
governance and the management through that, it's a lot better than PIM, right?
Well, like I said, PIM is great, but it's great for if you don't require custom roles. Often within Azure, especially within Azure, we're creating roles that are specific for your job task. So if you are not a contributor or owner of a subscription or a virtual machine, we often doing multiple things, but I don't want to make you a contributor because then you can contribute to everything. So I might be spinning up virtual machines, key vaults, adding SQL servers, that type of stuff. So I create a custom role for that engineer. You can't do that with PIM. You can only give them the built-in roles and elevate themselves, where this you can actually create those custom roles. Cool. So where are we? Here we are. So the next one I want to touch on is verified ID. So basically what verified ID is a way for us as an entity to provide you a digital access card. It's a way for you to be able to quickly onboard, quickly authenticate yourself. So really similar to adding your cards to Google Pay or Apple Pay, and you double click and you have access to your card. Very similar, we're basically giving you a digital identity within our companies. And with that, we're utilizing the experience either within our websites or onboarding or whatever it may be. Now, this can be as simple as I've done it, or you can make it even complicated and extend it to other IDPs, which is independent or identity providers. So if we think about Microsoft, they might have a verification process for all of your certifications that you have. You can integrate it into that as well. So if someone applies for a job, you ask them to upload their certificates. It does a check and verifies that before moving into the next stage. That's all part of the verified ID. But for the simple demo purposes, basically what it is we are utilizing the Microsoft Authenticator app. We get our verified ID, and then we utilize that within the organization or within the systems that support it. So what it looks like from a demo perspective is I'm going to jump into the verified ID. There's not a lot that you can do. Like I said, you can extend this into other IDPs, but for now, I've basically created a domain. So I've verified that I own the domain, and that I've allowed users to basically get a verified ID if they successfully authenticate themselves. So again, if I go into my account, you'll see there it says get my verified ID. If I click that, it's going to give me a QR code that I'm able to scan my authentication app and get my verified ID. All right. So there's my verified ID that I've already got. It's sitting within my authentication app. And if we have a look at the, just a quick demo as to how this works. So basically what can happen is this is a online store, and we basically sell laptops, but I offer discounts to my verified employees. If I click access discounts, we're going to see verify my employee credentials. If I click on that, it's going to say to me scan the barcode, which I will do with my authentication app. And what it's going to do is it's going to transfer that digital ID that I have there. It's going to ask me, do you want to do it? I'm going to say yes. And as soon as it transfers there, you'll see it's already authenticated, and it will change the pricing because it's verified me and it knows who I am. So we can introduce this into a lot of things like a ticketing system. So if we have customers, we want to make sure that they are our customers or our staff, we can put that in place. There's a whole onboarding that people do with regards to employees where they put those verified IDs into it. So it can be very powerful, but the verified ID by itself is pretty useless. You're going to have systems to integrate it with. All right. But yeah, that's as simple as verified IDs is. Pretty easy to install. You're just going to have to get the developers to actually support it within their application. Cool. The last one I want to touch on, and I don't have a demo for this because I don't have a license for it, and it is a standalone license, so it's not stacked with anything, is Microsoft Entra Workload Identities. So basically what this is what I showed you around being able to do conditional access policies, privileged identity management around the human identity piece. This is designed purely for your service principals. So it's designed for those identities that are attached to apps, that are attached to workloads, that we often forget. And the reason why it's so important that we actually manage these is if we think about a human, we're going to apply multi-factor authentication to it. A device or a mobile IoT device can't do MFA challenges. It's going to have a password that we have to store somewhere. So it's not a password that we have in our head that we save. Hopefully we don't save it on Notepad, but it's something that we can't store without other people seeing it. So we have to store it securely somewhere. We have to secure it from a conditional access perspective again, because we don't have that ability to challenge it with MFA. And what we're seeing trends where a lot of the managed identities are being targeted now, because they are an easier target than we have with our human identities. Like I said, we have things like accepting a challenge on a phone or a device, whereas a managed identity cannot, or service principal cannot do that. So we have to start looking at what this looks like. And from this is why Microsoft has the workload identity piece within Entra. So basically, this is an old slide, but it's from 2021. So this is pretty much current now, where for every one user within an environment, we generally see 20 service principals that have been created. So if we think and we go back into our environments, maybe after the session, and we go have a look at how many service principals we have within our Azure environment or AWS, wherever it may be, and how are we ensuring that when that application makes a call with those credentials, that it is that application making that call with those credentials. And this is how we do it with that, because we can actually start bringing, just like I did with that authentication context within a conditional access policy, I did it as a human being. I can now do that as an application. So I know my application sitting in New Zealand. I know my application's IP address is X. I know that my application deals with people only in New Zealand or within New Zealand and Australia. Cool. So let's set those as context within our conditional access policy, that if my app decides to do an authentication from the likes of Italy or Spain, I know my app's not residing there, so why should I allow it to actually pass that through? And that's why it's important that we start thinking about those identities that are attached to services, not only to humans. So with that, like I said, we are able to protect all of it, and we can also do access reviews. So if, for example, that workload gets identified as risky, so just like we had with risky users, we're going to get risky workloads. If that workload decides that, I don't know, maybe it does something funny, IP address suddenly changes, or it seems to be spoofed, it can get increased to something like a medium. And what will happen then, that application can go through an access review process. And we can either set it to allow it to go through but flag it, or we can say block it and allow it to go through the process to see what is happening with that. So really, really powerful way for us to manage those identities that don't have a human being behind them.
So now we're having to manage identities for robots as well.
Well, exactly. And this is the thing, is because of copilots and agents, all the agentic stuff coming through, we're going to be creating more and more and more of these things. And they're all going to be using service principals. They're going to become more and more prevalent in all of our environments. So this is something that if it was my environment, I would certainly be looking at saying, okay, well, how do we get access to this, and what does our service principal architecture and platforms look like? How are we managing these? I'm sure they're probably sitting in key vaults and we're applying those. Maybe we're doing rotation of keys. But again, that is one thing, but how do we ensure that that application is the one that's calling for that authentication piece? And we need to do that through conditional access. And that's me, guys. Like I said, it's quite a journey. These are only a couple of the things that I've mentioned. There are a couple of new features like private access or private internet access that moves us away from traditional VPNs to what is known as ZTNA, which is basically zero trust network access. Those are very cool features also within Entra ID Now Suite. So I didn't have the time to cover them today, but they are worth looking up, where we can move away from traditional VPNs and move into something that they call ZTNA. So yeah, those are two ones that I'd say have a read up on them. They are really, really good tools to also consider. And with that, I'll hand to my colleague Liam to just take you through the licensing. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Craig. Hi, guys. My name is Liam. I look after the Modern Workplace Dynamics Power Platform portfolio, more from a licensing perspective, so sort of, I guess, the non-technical version of Craig, enough to be dangerous, but not really enough to tick the boxes and deploy something. So, yeah, I guess my area is a little bit more one-dimensional in regards to licensing. Obviously, that's enough in itself to have a role in, hence my what I do, I guess, in my day-to-day. So a big part of my job is, I guess, how do we license customers, user groups in, I mean, I guess the best way, and using that term somewhat loosely, but sort of in a way, because there's one side of it which is from a cost-effective approach, but also what is it the organization wants to get out of these products, and also from a roadmap perspective, where do you want to go? Because a lot of Microsoft now, especially under the new commerce experience structure, under the new licensing, it's pretty strict with cancellations, scaling down, things like that, or even upgrade paths, right? So some of you have probably already found that out, potentially the hard way too, like even myself when it first came on board. But things are quite different to what we used to have under the old programs with that less flexibility. So it's really important that we get the licensing component right, and we also make sure that we're doing it in the most cost-effective way possible, because obviously a lot of these Microsoft products and third-party products are pretty darn expensive, I'm sure you'd all agree. So we want to make sure we're getting the best bang for buck, and we do this in the right way, which is obviously like a big value add that myself and Craig really come in and add. Cool, so really nice and easy, one slide from me, which will take a little bit more time to go through. But when I always look at Microsoft licensing as a whole, I always kind of look at it as like there's many ways to skin the cat, if you will. And a lot of these products do come under your base licensing as well with Microsoft's. So you're probably quite well familiar with, you know, the SMB suite of products, Business Basic, Standard, Premium, and then you've got obviously the Enterprise stack across E1, E3, E5. Some of you in the education space might be across, you know, the A1, A3, A5 stuff. But I guess starting off with what Craig actually sort of, coming back to his point, was around when we look at the Entra ID free plan, that is one that I haven't actually added there for very good reasons, but as sort of Craig alluded to earlier, and one of the main things we just got to remember, especially when we're looking at in comparison to plan 1, which is conditional access, which is sort of, I guess, the entry point for most people when they start deploying Entra ID solutions, is comparing what that looks like to free and go, oh, well, why can't I just use the Entra ID free plan? Look, you absolutely can. You obviously lack a huge amount of features, and one of the biggest ones around conditional access is not being able to obviously choose when you want to challenge users to authenticate, which is a big problem and obviously gets pretty mundane, and you'll know if you're in an organization that is using a free one based on that pretty quickly. So we sort of look at identity management as, I guess, our base plan, or what we really need is, I guess, the base standard. We look at Entra ID Plan 1 as that is the first option for that. Obviously MFA, and we can actually choose when we want to do those conditional access features and when to challenge users. Obviously self-serve password reset and single sign-on, I guess, are sort of the main features. Obviously there's a lot more under that, and Craig's gone through a lot of that already today, but that's sort of where I start at, I suppose. So that is included again in Business Premium. You won't find it in Basic or Standard. You'll find it in M365 E3 as well, but those are really the only plans that start with Entra ID Plan 1. We can obviously add it separately too. The pricing I've added here is purely just Microsoft recommended retail pricing, and it's this is under the 12-month commit pay monthly option, so just be aware of that as I go through this. But this is sort of where it starts. And when you start looking at stacking licensing, because we can add all this separately, and I think when we start getting into Entra ID Plan 2, Suite, and some of the individual add-ons down there, it can really make sense to add them separately, but I sort of find that with Entra ID Plan 2, we're better to start with a plan like Business Premium, start with there, because obviously we're getting things like Intune and that with that also. But obviously when you start stacking this pricing up, it stacks up pretty quickly. So as just to throw an example, if you go say Business Standard around $18.90, you stack Entra ID Plan 1, $970, and then say Intune Plan 1 as well, if you're going to go through that route also for device management. Next thing you know, you're over the price of business premium pretty quickly. So that's why we sort of look at the starting point sort of being around that business premium and up stack. Obviously we can do it individually, but that's sort of where we want to start. From there we start getting into Plan 2. The big obviously advantage as we go through to Plan 2, risk-based conditional access policies, PIM or privileged identity management, and then access reviews as well. Sort of the main 3 key points that build on top of the existing P1 features. We can add that separately, 1460. That's quite a common stack when you start looking at a user base under 300 seats. You're using Business Premium already, which is a great product. A great way to level up your security for identity management without obviously moving to something like an M365 E5, which is $90 almost per user per month, which includes Plan 2. That's the only plan that includes Entra ID Plan 2 is E5. So like I say, that's where we sort of come in and we really want to do an analysis of user groups and work out what the best way to license you is, because often, unless you're using say Teams Phone Standard and Power BI Pro for that user, E5 may not be the best route and you're probably better to stack it with like Entra ID P2. From there we move on to Entra Suite, which is basically everything that I guess comes under the individual add-ons around ID governance, as Craig went through, internet and private access features. That's kind of the add-on for Entra Suite to Plan 1 or Plan 2. Now, what I really want to highlight around what you're also getting with Entra Suite is you can actually stack it with an individual product. So the $19.40 has a minimum requirement of Plan 1. You have to stack that full amount onto Plan 2, but if you have an Entra ID Plan 2, whether it's from E5 or an individual, there is a discounted price for that add-on to just E5, or if you've got an ID P2, which is about half the price. So there is a way to actually stack Suite on top of Plan 1 or Plan 2. Plan 1, you're going to have to pay the full $19.40, but if you go Plan 2, there is a way to do that through a specific SKU, which is discounted for that. And there's actually also a SKU for Suite across the frontline worker plans. If anyone's using those F1, F3 plans for those frontline contractors, things like that, there's a way to do that as well. If we want to stack them individually, just those features, and this is, I'll be honest, these start getting quite expensive as you can kind of see here, but like even just Entra Governance, $11.30, Internet Access or Private Access, $8.10. They stack up pretty quickly when you start deploying all that stack. So I do think Entra Suite is probably the better point to be at if you're looking at going for the full identity management piece. So yeah, I guess just to summarize, there's many ways that we can license Entra ID. I really do think that we want to use ID P2 as sort of our base and we build from there depending on what sort of security posture you're wanting to deploy. And obviously we can, like when we start getting into the really specific products, we can license those individually as well. But yeah, I really encourage everybody to sort of start around that P1 piece and then build out from there, of course. Was there any questions on the licensing before I hand over to Greg to look after the managed service piece?
No, just to add something on top of it, obviously when we work through what Liam described as a licensing audit exercise with our clients, we want the licensing to be the result of what we want to achieve for our clients in terms of protection, what features they're going to use and all that. And then it is our job as a Microsoft provider to actually work it out the most cost-effective way that ticks all the boxes for you. So this is something that we do on an annual basis, and if needs, even less than that, every 6 months. It depends on if our clients have projects that will potentially impact the licensing structure, right? So all the responsibility and the job is taken care of by us and our team, so you don't have to spend your time figuring out how to make it cheap and simple. And sometimes we have knowledge that, it's not very well marketed by Microsoft, and we can really, bring some significant savings or better structure to our clients, yeah. And obviously these prices are not our prices, just MSRP, so we charge about 15% less than that. So if you have a chat to us, we can quote it up on a plan basis.
Awesome, cool. I'll hand that over to Greg to start going through some of the managed services piece.
I've got one, thanks mate. Cheers. Morning everyone. Better go the right way though. Excuse me. I've only got a very short amount of time today, so you're only going to get one slide from me, which is good. I think you've probably had enough PowerPoint for the day. Look, I'm Greg Strawn. I've joined PB about 7 months ago now. I'm not the new boy anymore, and my remit is to build a managed services business for PB. As Victor said, it's a natural continuation of PB. They've done fantastically with the licensing team and developed a really good business there, and it's a very intricate business, as you can see, and they bring a lot to the market and to our customers, and we want to replicate that exactly the same way with our services. To give you a little bit of background, what we've been doing and what we're offering. In the last few months while we've been there, we've obviously been building our capacity, our team members, and we've got a number of staff on the books at the moment. We've stood up a service desk, and we're engaging a lot of customers. Now, people have been asking me, what are you delivering? And the reality is we've been listening a lot to the market, right? And it varies wildly, is the reality. Some people would like us to service the back end of their networks, maintain and manage their infrastructure, and that's a very straightforward piece for us, to be fair. There's always the component for end user support and remote support, again, while we've stood up a service desk, because a lot of businesses, especially a little bit smaller businesses, or those growing businesses, want to actually have that support and actually focus on their business growth. And other pieces of the puzzle, professional services and project type work, supporting people with Entra ID is a great example. We've done a number of projects already with customers, not so much around Entra, but 365 and migrations and Intune policies, and that piece of the puzzle is also another part of our kit bag. Something that I want to raise today too, that possibly you aren't aware of and where we're going, and we want to be sort of the full gambit for our customers, is we've teamed up with some very reputable partners, and we're offering infrastructure hosting as well. And another thing that's been very popular, actually, talking to customers, connectivity. There's a lot of people out there who are with some major suppliers, I won't say names, and they're on legacy connectivity plans, and it's really surprising if you shop around. And we've been part of PB. We come to the market and we will be aggressive. We may not be the very cheapest in the market. We don't want to be that. The point of our service that we're bringing is that we want to bring a really good quality service to market, and it's not around just giving you a quote and going, that's the cheapest and we've beaten somebody by something. It's actually knowing that we can deliver, and it's going to be the very best for our customers. And another thing I'll just quickly touch on is cybersecurity. That's a huge thing that a lot of our customers have been talking to us around, things like Entra, conditional access, and then there's other third-party products out there being PB, we've got lots of partners and very, very good partners who've got fantastic products around MDRs, EDRs, and we can deliver those and manage those and deploy those for you all. So overall, this is not a full portfolio by any means. If there's something out there, we're open to discussing with customers what they're after. If we cannot do it, and we think we shouldn't be doing it, we will be very frank and very upfront with you. But if we have a partner that can deliver it with us or alongside us, we will engage, definitely. And I think that's about it, short and sweet. Any questions? Great. If you need to have a chat afterwards about any services, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you.
I'll just do your microphone.
Yeah, mate.
Just to make sure that the video's got all there. All right, so I hope you guys found everything that we presented here today valid. Now, there is a bit to navigate through, as you could tell by all the Entra and different layers and aspects to it, right? The expectation that you can have as a client of PB Tech on the licensing side, at least, is that we'll come together and we'll look into your environment, we'll coach you through what needs to be taken as consideration when you're planning on deploying some of that, access packages and anything on that was discussed today. So our relationship as a Microsoft provider doesn't stop on a licensing, it goes beyond that. We have a ton of very well-known referable clients in New Zealand and companies that you guys will all know, where we're getting involved into the Intune side of things, Defender, Entra, and all that, right? Whether we go through the route where we bring Craig in and Liam, and we take a more passive approach from the point of view that we'll coach you and shadow you guys to implement this yourselves, or you're looking at fully outsource this to us, then it's a decision that we'll make on a case by case, right? But there's a lot of subsidy and funding that's available from a Microsoft perspective that a lot of clients are not aware of, because the MSPs out there wouldn't want to expose that to you because it would cannibalize their business. But it is available, and we put that in the table to our clients. So if you raise your hand and say, look, we want to trail towards the Entra ID Plan 2, we'll help to put the business case together, we'll help to secure some fundings, we'll help to deliver that as an outsourced exercise if you guys need to, or empower you guys internally to do it, right? So have a chat to us. I know that considering switching licensing to PB Tech or any other provider, sometimes it comes with a bit of a challenge with your existing providers, but we are really disrupting things. We're growing on a pace that the market, I think, never seen before on the cloud space, and there's a reason to that. And we are just as good of a provider as we are in terms of providing on a cheap price and helping our customers. So yeah, come and have a chat to us, and I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation. Thank you.
Okay.